What happens when a Las Vegas Reformed Jewish rabbi and a Las Vegas Presbyterian pastor have a conversation as friends? They discover that no matter where you live or what you believe, faith matters. In this episode of Faith Matters, Rabbi Sanford Akselrad from Congregation near Tamid and Reverend Adrian from Green Valley Presbyterian Church talk about the role of faith in providing comfort when bad things happen. The two spiritual leaders explore theological perspectives on God's love and grace, drawing insights from religious texts and personal experiences.
Hey Adrian, how are you?
I'm doing well. I always do better when I get to see you. It's always a gift to see a friend. You know that?
All right, that's sweet.
Life's
And
blessing.
we see each other virtually. We did see each other in person. That was fun. But today we're
Wait,
recording
Sandy.
virtually.
Now they know we're not in a coffee shop.
That's true.
I don't know. And we've said the whole idea is these are coffee shop conversations.
Did
I
we
do have
did we
coffee in
say
hand.
that?
Yeah,
All
we
right.
did.
Well,
This
you
is
have
coffee in
you
hand.
have your coffee and I have my Coca-Cola, so it's pretty close.
Great.
So usually we record these just to inform the listeners, and then it takes a few days for it to go through production. This is a shout out to Leslie Snadowsky. And so we're going to talk about something that really happened this week. It's a tragedy in Washington, D.C., where a helicopter and a plane collided. And by the time this podcast is published, I'm sure a lot more information will come about as to why it happened and hopefully some lessons learned that such a tragedy won't happen again.
Right.
But at the outset, our hearts, of course, go out to the families that are impacted, and it causes me to think really about a question that we're asked a lot, and that is about, evil in the world and why bad things happen to good people. Just that whole general topic, I think, is one that religion is responsible for coming up with an answer for. If, we may not have the answers to so-called scientific questions, but religion is always the place that people turn. And I don't know about you, sometimes, your mouth is just open and your eyes are wide and you can't believe what you're seeing, and your mouth can't utter the words that will articulate the sadness or the disbelief that you feel. And that too is part of human nature in confronting evil, I think.
Yeah, our humanity, just binds us with the people who are grieving and that enormous loss of life. My mouth was, wide open when I saw the news flash across the TV. It was such a shock to see that. I didn't realize that Washington had one of our nation's busiest airports.
Yeah, Reagan Airport. Very
And
busy.
of course, we do look for answers, I think, not only as people of faith, but as human beings. We try to navigate this life. We try to make sense of life in our world. And this is one of those perpetual questions that we always come to. How do we define, or how can we even reconcile our life, our faith, when tragedy strikes us, when tragedy strikes at home? And I think in this, I don't know that our traditions are very different in saying that we have prayers, we have words, we have faith, but we may not have answers for why in the immediate.
I think that it's always difficult because people want to find meaning in life. And yet they search the deepest when something bad happens. In other words, why did this happen? Corollary, why did this happen to me? Why did this happen to my family? We could ask broader, why did it happen to anyone? And yet we know within the experience of every single human being, you live long enough something will happen that challenges
Mm.
us. When you
Mhm.
watch the news, it's off to other people. So we shake our heads, but then we turn the channel or we go to the next news cycle. But when it happens to us personally, it's not just that we wonder about suffering. We just want to be reassured that perhaps our suffering has some kind of meaning. And that meaning
Mhm.
isn't always abundantly clear, and sometimes it never will be. Why does my loved one, or why do I get cancer, or why was so and so in a car accident or in the plane crash? And so I think it's a legitimate question, even if religion in general doesn't have an answer. I think there are answers, um, and sometimes it's enough to help people. One answer is there is no answer. All right. I don't know how satisfactory that is.
Right.
We just can't understand. We can't understand God's ways. It's deep, it's mysterious. I don't know how comforting that is, but that's one of them. The other is um, God created a universe that is governed by laws, and
Mhm.
therefore, if you drop something, it doesn't fall up, it falls down. You fire a gun, the bullet goes according to the laws of science and physics. Um, you're in a car and you crash, person's injured because of the nature of the crash.
Mm.
And so accidents happen and evil happens, but you can do a
Mm.
deeper dive, right? Why me? And why was I in that place at that time? And I think that's one of those eternal questions. I don't know if religion has the best answer, but the people who have weathered through that often do feel that there is a reason and a deeper meaning. And part of their resiliency is to understand in their own way what that might be.
As you read
That's their answer.
as you read the book of Job, I mean, the way I read it is Job is never given a reason for why he suffers. Now, not everybody would agree with me, but that's how I read Job.
Well, the answer that I've seen in Job is, who are you, lowly human being, to question me who made the mountains and the
Right.
trees and the sky? In other words, God knows best. And therefore, you're never going to understand, but you're not to question either. Um,
I
and
think that's always been my favorite part of Job when God says, "Were you there?
yeah,
Were you there when I laid the foundations of the earth?"
and I guess part of God's answer is it's not easy being God, right? There's a lot of variables.
Right.
Farmer is praying for rain. Uh,
Mm.
the person who um, is in the World Series wants no rain in good weather. Um, you know, the prayers can contradict each other depending upon an individual person's needs. But
And thank
ultimately,
goodness that we worship a God who sees a bigger picture than I can see in my limited perspective as I offer my prayers.
so I think that's a answer, which is God has a bigger picture in mind. But I guess I've been influenced by Harold Kushner, who wrote the book When Bad Things Happen to Good People. I've turned to that many times over my life. He had a son who died of progeria, which is a rare disease of where you
Mm.
die of old age by the time you're 11 or 12. You age at an accelerated rate. And here he was, a great rabbi. And so he didn't call the book Why Bad Things Happen, because he he posited bad things are going to happen to all of us. And he might go through some of the things, as I mentioned. It could be laws of
Yes.
physics. It could be God has a bigger picture of things. But he does propose an idea of a limited God, which I think in some circles would be controversial, which is God created the rules, the universe, and then no longer acts in history. And therefore, based upon the rules, some bad things are going to happen, some good things are going to happen, and we have a say over some of them, but not all of them. So his book is called When Bad Things Happen,
Mhm.
because he says it's not about the why. Ultimately, it's this is going to happen, and when it does, when it happens, how can you respond and come to terms with it? So ultimately, it's a book about resiliency. And I
I
guess
read
that's
that
one
book
reason
so
why.
many years ago. I don't even, I think I was in junior high. I could barely understand it, but it was such a monumental book in terms of its influence on our understanding of grief, for
Yes,
example. But I think what Harold Kushner did for me was to point out the fact that in this world we will suffer. Now, I would imagine you had the privilege of maybe meeting him. He was quite a bit older than you, but I
right.
no.
No, never met him. I wish I had.
Yeah.
He was alive during my lifetime for a portion of his life. So,
Mm.
and then he would go on speaking engagements when he became famous. So good, brilliant preacher and wrote a lot of books, but the first book was probably the most famous and influential. So,
And there's another book that I read, I came back to, and that was Viktor Frankl's book,
Man's
Man's
Search for
Search for
Meaning.
Meaning. And I'm reading that with a group of pastors right now. And it's very interesting that Viktor Frankl doesn't spend a lot of time asking why he's in the concentration camp, as I'm understanding his reading. But he says, what is my purpose in this moment? What can I do in this moment? I don't know pastorally if that's going to help me comfort someone in their time of grief, but it is an encouragement to me as I'm going through a time of questioning, for example. Um, but I think so often with the grief process, what we forget is that sense of just being present.
Yes.
I don't want answers when I'm grieving. Maybe you do, but I don't. I just want to know that you care.
I think that's the start,
Hmm.
but it will lead to question of why.
Yeah.
Could be, and depending upon the nature of the loss, it could be,
Yeah.
there could be an anger or, I need an explanation. I'm sure with the plane helicopter crash, they're going to wonder
Mm.
why it wasn't staffed properly and why there was a failure that caused the crash. What were those? And so, you know, that'll enter the legal process and all kinds of crazy.
Right.
But when it's just, our congregants and they come to us as a pastor, a rabbi, minister, I do think they want that comfort. And as you counsel them along the way, I do think that they want us to be present. And some do want a reaffirmation that even though we can't know, nevertheless, the loss does have some meaning. Maybe we
I
can't
would love
articulate what it is, but that's where I think we get in the category of faith.
I would love to hear from our listeners. What would you want? And what do you not want? Because I remember there was a moment in my life when we thought my son was dying. And one of my friends came up to me and said, I know you don't understand this right now, but God's going to use this for good. Do I believe that was possible? Do I believe it's possible? By the way, our son's still alive. Yes.
Okay.
But did I need that at the moment? No. To me, it was almost enough to make me want to walk away from the faith. I was like, no, I'm grieving right now. I need
Yeah.
someone to be here who understands the depth of my pain.
Well, one is being a theologian and one is being a comforting person, right?
Right,
And in
right.
that moment, you just needed a hug and
Yeah.
someone to be there. In our faith tradition, when you walk into a house of mourning, you're
Mm,
actually told not to speak first. You know, you wait until the person who's in mourning speaks first, and then when they're ready to engage, then you engage with them. So it can start with silence, and that you're just there, two friends being present for each other. And
and
that,
how interesting because we talked about Job earlier. And if you go to the very beginning of Job, the friends just come in and they sit with Job. But as soon as they open their mouth, the trouble starts, right? They start questioning, what did you do to deserve this?
Yeah.
I
Well,
love the fact that we can wrestle with these complex questions as pastor theologians, as people who are in congregations and parishes. Um, I just want to say that from my perspective, and I wonder if this is true of Reform Judaism, but from our perspective, we do believe that God walks with us in our pain,
yes,
and that at least I have
true.
that comfort.
I think that is true in
Hmm.
Reform Judaism too, or at least it's a message that I have.
Yeah.
Someone once said to me, Christians talk about God's love and Jews never do. We're always talking about, this this angry God. And
Mm.
I reflected on that. I would say the biblical God is kind of this angry God, punishing Pharaoh or threatening, to withhold rain unless
Hmm.
food, unless you follow in his commandments. But it evolved into a much more loving concept of God. And I would say the notion that, um, you know, walking with God or when times are tough, God carries you, so to speak. I think that's kind of a shared message between Christianity and
Yes.
Judaism.
And for anyone who talks about an angry God, I always love to go back to Psalm 103. The Lord is merciful and gracious, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love.
Yeah.
I may not understand that love, but I believe God is a very gracious God. And I believe God's grace has been poured in my life. I don't always understand why things happen, but I don't know that I personally could handle life's hardships without faith.
So again, when times are good, that's the Job story.
Mm.
Now he's a great believer. So we say Satan, Satan, rather than Satan? What does Satan do?
Mm.
He's like this prosecutorial angel who pokes at God. Well, what if you took away his family? What if you take away his wealth? What if you take
Right.
away his health?
Right.
Would he still be so pious? And it goes to the point where it's easy to take things for granted and be a person of faith when things are going good. But when times are tough, you still believe. And to me, that is the point where the rabbi and the congregant or the minister and congregant meet.
Mm.
Because when they're angry at God, there's now a barrier between them and God, and they shut God out because they blame God.
Mm.
And that's where I try to move people. Don't interpret your loss, your pain as God punishing you.
Yeah.
Rather, understand that there are a lot of reasons we're human, our bodies are going to fail us. There is the law of the world. We're going to get into accidents. Bad stuff will happen. So that's when we need to not explain why it happened when it did, but to turn to God for a source of strength and comfort. And instead of just staying angry at God as the source of the evil that befell us. Every person can figure out something they did wrong and view it as a punishment by God. Not too helpful to anyone who's going through pain,
Right.
not even a good explanation. Therefore, to me, it's when bad things happen, how can we let God into our lives? And when we can figure that out, I think we find comfort. And if not the answer, an answer that will suffice for the moment.
You know, the reason I resonate with your ministry so much, and I want my listener to hear this, is because you are a brilliant mind. You're a good theologian, but you have a pastor's heart. And I tell all my Jewish friends, if you're looking for a rabbi that's going to speak to your heart and mind, I know the rabbi. Go to his synagogue.
Well, Thank you. And I tell all my Christian friends,
Don't go there.
I know a pastor who's a doll, a real doll in so many ways. Thank you. I feel the same way. Well, interesting discussion. Thank you, everyone, for entering into our podcast. Please do reach out to us with suggested topics.
Yes.
Congregation near Tamid in Henderson and Green Valley Presbyterian, Reverend Dahl. Let us know a topic you'd like us to discuss, or maybe, if you want, throw in an answer to the subject of today about why evil happens, or when evil happens, how should we respond? Until then, thanks for letting us into your life. Faith matters to us. We hope matters of faith matter to you as well. So be well. Talk to you next time, Adrian.
Take care. Good to see you, as always.
Faith Matters features Rabbi Sanford Akselrad from Congregation near Tamid and Reverend Adrian Dahl from Green Valley Presbyterian Church, and is produced by Leslie Snadowsky. We hope you join us again for our next podcast episode of Faith Matters.